I was hiring.
Sorry.
I was hiring a housing development manager. This is Sarah Megason. She came from Planning and Development Services. Do you want to just say hi?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sarah Megason. Really excited to be over here in HCD. Was recently working over with Corin and PDSD for the last few years. I'm a planner by training and worked a little bit in affordable housing in Summit County, Colorado. It was Breckenridge Ski Resort, so kind of a little bit of a different need, but I'm seeing a lot of the same parallels of need here as well. So I didn't ski, so I moved back to Tucson. Now I'm here and I'm really, really excited about this position and working with you all on the subcommittee. So it's really nice to meet you virtually, and I look forward to getting to know you all and working with you more and more.
Welcome.
All right, turning it back over to you, Shay.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we'll do the call to the order. So we'll just do the roll call really quick. I'll start with the ex officio, voting members, Jim Toffel.
Present.
Myself, Shreya Jimenez, and then ex officio, Maggie Amato.
Here.
Marcos.
Here.
Looks like we have Betty.
Here.
Betty. You still with us?
Yes.
Okay. We have Megan Headings.
Here.
Sally, you're not our non-ex officio, are you? Sally Schwinn?
I don't know what I am. I'm a participant.
An interloper.
Okay.
Kidding.
We are glad to have Sally here as part of
Yes.
it.
I join whenever I can. So
Okay, great. I'm trying to remember. I thought we had, can't remember if we had someone from Gorman or not as ex officio. I don't think so, but it's great to have you guys here. And I think did I miss anyone from ex officio? I don't think so. Aside from that, let's go into the rest of the audience. Do you want to introduce yourselves? I'll start with Joe.
Sure. Joe Audino, board member, Historic Fourth Avenue Coalition, treasurer of Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, and Barrio Centro resident.
Okay, and I always forget who El Carpio is.
Hi, that's me, Leticia Carpio, Housing, HCD, Community Development here. Community Service Manager. Just
Okay.
here to listen. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I think the rest that we have here is just City of Tucson staff. Typically, we don't have you all introduce yourselves, but we're happy that you're here also. Okay, the statement, I don't have it with me, but basically, we are virtual due to COVID-19. We ask that you please turn off your microphones if you're not speaking. Limit your comments, try to be brief. When we have the call to the audience, no more than 3 minutes per person. If you don't have, I think we all have proficient Zoom users here, so I won't go into the rest of that. Okay. The next, is the call to the audience. So this is the time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, Commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. So do we have anyone here who wants to speak? Okay, looks like no one. Okay, well, moving on. Let's get into the rest of the agenda. Number 3 is proposed zoning changes. So Corin, I assume that's what you were here for. Are you gonna lead the way on this one? We have EV readiness, parking, and future changes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think I am a subcommittee member, at least I remember selecting this one. So I try to be here. I can't always be, I think maybe I missed the past few meetings, but happy to be part of this subcommittee and kind of hope to work with you guys over time on, you know, especially zoning and planning issues related to affordable housing. So I wanted to just provide a very brief update on a code amendment that is before Mayor and Council, or sorry, Planning Commission right now. We've been working on it for a couple months. Sorry, my screen just went a little weird when I tried to share something. Hold on, I wanted to share one slide so you guys have a sense of what's being proposed. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, great.
Yeah,
so
you're good.
we have been working on a code amendment related to commercial parking standards. I don't need to remind all of you, you're very aware of how parking affects affordable housing and affordability of housing. But so that's why I wanted to make sure all of you were aware of what's being proposed. There's really two components of this proposal that are a bit distinct, but both relate to parking. So the first piece is a proposal to require EV charging infrastructure as part of new commercial development. And we're really focused on multifamily office. The first one should really say office instead of commercial, and then retail. And wanted to mention this, especially for what's being proposed around multifamily. So the idea here is, of course, you know, EV car adoption is growing nationally and in Tucson, and we want to be prepared for that change in our transportation network and make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to support that. We changed the building code last year to require that new homes, single family homes and duplexes have an EV outlet. And so now we're looking at commercial standards as well. And especially want to look at multifamily, since most people want to be able to charge at home, want to be able to charge at their office. But that's really the factor most people think about when they're choosing whether to purchase an EV or not, is can I charge at home? So we want to make sure that folks who live in apartments, renters also have the infrastructure available to them to make that choice, to choose EV if they want to. So the proposal for multifamily is that 25% of spaces overall have some level of EV infrastructure. There's different types of EV infrastructure. So just a little on that. Stations means some sort of station that requires metering. Often those are like the branded stations you see, like a Tesla station or different, there's all kinds of different vendors out there. Outlets just mean it's a way to charge. It actually has a charging outlet. And then conduit means there is conduit available, but it's not yet set up for charging. But we're kind of, you know, planning far into the future. So the proposal for multifamily is that 10% of parking spaces have outlets and 15% have conduit. So as you can see, that is the highest requirement of any of these uses that we're looking at, again, because at home is where most people want to charge. But we did want to, you know, kind of moderate that in terms of what's actually required in terms of available outlets versus conduit, because there is a price difference there in terms of the cost to install. So most of what's required is just to lay the conduit so it's available in the future to be responsive to market demand and changes as there's greater adoption of EV vehicles. Now, in terms of the stations and outlets, the reason that it's requiring outlets and not stations is just because we want to be sort of agnostic, if you will, on who is providing that that electricity, you know, so there is an option to do different types of metering, but really leave that flexibility up to the apartment operator or multifamily operator. So that is the proposal in terms of EV. And you can see there's also proposed standards for office and retail as well. The second component of this code amendment is an amendment to our individual parking plan criteria. Some of you may be familiar with individual parking plan. This became an option about 10 years ago in our code in 2011. And it was a way to provide flexibility for sites. Based on certain criteria, sites can apply for an individual parking plan to reduce their overall parking requirement. There are some criteria. It needs to be, close to transit line and or, have a shared use option with another adjacent site. There's a few criteria, but affordable housing has never been a criteria on its own, while facilities for the elderly and disabled are eligible to use the individual parking plan just kind of on their own without meeting other criteria. Affordable housing has not been listed as a criteria. A number of affordable housing developments have been able to use the individual parking plan because they tend to be close to transit. But we didn't want to create that we didn't want to continue having that as a barrier potentially for affordable housing that wanted to reduce their parking requirement this way. So we're adding that as a criteria or proposing to. And as a side note, the other change to the IPP or individual parking plan is to allow restaurants and bars to use it. That use has been excluded. And the proposal is to allow that use as well, with the idea of allowing some of them to continue with the open air outdoor seating that has been very popular and beneficial for those restaurants during the pandemic. But really the relevant change here is that affordable housing would be able to utilize that. So that's the proposal. Happy to get feedback, and then just also wanted to mention that there's a number of other zoning changes to support both affordable housing and more affordable market rate housing that are mentioned in the housing affordability plan, the HAS plan. So those are definitely on our radar, and that's where interested in feedback from this group on other types of zoning changes that you think should be prioritized in the coming years. Although, not that we can guarantee any code changes. We're working on a lot of other projects at the moment, including updating the general plan very soon. But want to get feedback from this group if there's other things you'd like to see, like, we know there's interest in just reducing parking minimums for affordable housing across the board in terms of the baseline requirements, and there's other code flexibility that we could provide for affordable housing. And those are things we can definitely consider, but would be a future code change, just to be clear. So, but first, any feedback or thoughts on this proposal? And I should have mentioned this is something we presented to the Planning Commission on February 2nd at a study session, and there will be a public hearing March 2nd. So in 2 weeks, Wednesday, March 2nd at 6 p.m. Is the public hearing on this proposal. So you could submit comments beforehand or attend.
Hi, this is Jim. I think it'd be good if we could distribute the HAS plan, the Housing Affordability Strategy for Tucson, or whatever the HAS stands. I was just looking on our website because I think it's important to refresh our memory on what those goals are. And so if we could, is it possible for us to get that link up on the website again, or send it out to the group?
Yes, absolutely, Jim. I can link to it from our commission website. I just put the link in the chat, but yes.
Okay, perfect. So I was on this, I was in the first meeting. I've been invited to the last couple. I haven't been able to make them. From a cost perspective, Because I think it's important to be conscious, especially for affordable housing, on what the costs are. If it's planned properly up front, the conduits and outlets usually don't run more than $5,000 to $10,000. Conduit runs maybe $20 to $30 a lineal foot, and then you're just adding a few circuits and upsizing the main breaker panel. So it's not a huge load. The charging stations themselves right now run about $5,000 a piece. But I agree with you. That's the direction everything's moving, and it is a rapidly changing technology still. So I think we're going to continue to see changes over the next several years.
And I think Jim knows where he's exactly right on target for the first thing we think about is costs. We're not required at this point in the cities that we're working in to put this in to Phoenix or Tempe or Chandler or Glendale. So this would be new. Right now, we're not putting this infrastructure in. There is some talk about it being put in at the cost of, I'm not sure what the power company is, if it's APS or who, at no cost to our affordable housing projects for choice neighborhoods. But that's really the only involvement we've had with it at this point. So just some FYI.
I see people with their hands up. Joe, did you want to go? And then Megan? I don't know who was first.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I had a couple questions, I think, for Corin. If we're doing parking reductions for affordable housing, I imagine that that's because you have some data that shows less of a need for parking at affordable housing units than we currently have. Do we have a number around that? How many, on average, how many spots are needed for affordable housing? What's that gap between that and regular, like market rate?
Question. So, and I just want to clarify, what's being proposed now is making affordable housing an eligible use to apply for an individual parking plan. And an individual parking plan is a site-specific approval so that each project can make exactly that case. This is what's required, but this is the demand we see. That's why we want to reduce it by 10 spaces. Now, what you're saying, Joe, that's what we would want to do before we do any sort of change to as of right parking requirements for affordable housing, is have more data, which we have kind of anecdotally, I would say, but would want to do a more thorough analysis of how much parking is going underutilized or not being utilized on affordable housing developments across the city. So were we to do something where we reduce the parking ratio for affordable housing in terms of the minimum standard, reducing it to something below 1 space per unit, then that's what we would want to gather that data. Right now, though, just to be clear, it's a site-specific reduction where each development would have to make that argument.
Okay, so individually they would just have to say, hey, here's why we believe for this site we need less parking than the minimum that's normally for these units. Got it. The other one is, you said some changes for affordable market rate housing, which sounded kind of like a jumble and a contradiction to me. What are we talking? Do you have anything more for me there?
Oh, that was referring to, so, I mean, Anne can maybe put a finer point on this, but I believe the housing affordability plan has strategies, not just for like subsidized rent regulated affordable housing, but is a more expansive definition of affordable, meaning attainable to, the incomes in our community. So that's what I was referring to, is that when we're talking about doing like a parking reduction or zoning changes, that would be for subsidized affordable housing that has, rent restrictions and income qualifications. But there's a whole different approach. And the reason I differentiate them is because the zoning needs are a little different, or just what tools we would use to incentivize this type of development is a bit different. So when we're talking about market rate, bringing down the cost of housing in our community more in general so that it is affordable to middle class, middle income households, you know, we're looking at things like maybe allowing multifamily in different parts of the city where it's not currently allowed, looking at missing middle housing, as it's called, townhouses, different development styles that can be lower cost to build, and, you know, maybe create more density on a given site so there's greater returns and, you know, kind of economies of scale. The ADU, accessory dwelling unit zoning change is kind of part of that whole strategy as well.
So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're talking about non-subsidized affordability, like naturally occurring, the affordable housing, the NOAA stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm interested to see what there is. Thank you.
And actually, I think Jim answered my first question, which was going to be if we knew sort of the expected cost to the requirement. The second question I would have is if there's any known possibility of subsidy programs to support the outlets or the stations that would be available, specifically supporting affordable housing, multifamily.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the subsidy. As someone else mentioned, I think there's been some discussion from TP and other utilities around that, but I'm not sure where that stands. I do have some data on the costs. Let me just pull that up. Because this was definitely part of the discussion. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention also is that one component of this is we are proposing a parking incentive or reduction so that if a project goes beyond the sort of baseline requirement for EV charging, there could be a parking reduction. So, oops, sharing the same slide as before, hold on. Just stop. Trying to share the slide that has some cost estimates. Hold on.
And then while you're pulling that up, I guess the other question would be if this is intended to go in effect right away, or if there's a planned year that this would go in effect.
So this ordinance, if it's adopted by mayor and council, those ordinances take effect within 30 or after 30 days. So it would go into effect probably in 2022. I am having a little trouble, so I'm gonna share a different way. Let me see if you guys can see this. Can you guys see? Okay, it's just not in presentation, but so this gives you some cost estimates per space for different sizes of parking lots, because there are some efficiencies, of course, for larger lots. But this gives you a sense of, you know, on a certain lot size, what would be the cost per space for doing that EV infrastructure. So you can see, I mean, and that's a pretty big range. We were not able to get really fine grain estimates. We see a bit of variation from the data that we've found.
I think if I could add to that, so, you know, we put in, I think 6 charging stations at the Flynn, and they ran about 5,000 a piece. There are different, like there's the fast charging stations that can charge a car in 20 minutes. Those are usually like 200 amp. Those are going to be a lot more expensive than a typical station that would be used overnight, which would maybe be a 30 amp station. So I think there is a large range in cost just depending on the usage. So a restaurant's going to probably want to have a different type of a charging station than an apartment.
There is quite a bit of variation there. That's one reason we We didn't want to have specific standards around the station, or the highest standards for, speed of charging. Because yeah, there can be some pretty big cost differences.
Hey guys, it's Sally. And is this only for new construction?
Yeah, this would apply to new construction and also projects that are large expansions that trigger, conformance with current zoning. So usually that's a 25% expansion.
I see, Anne, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts and questions for this group regarding this. In terms of, Megan, your question about grants, the one thing I would just say, it seems like if there's an affordable housing project that can show a real need for support, the city, state, and local fiscal recovery funding grant applications has an energy efficiency category. And so I think that we're completing the first round, the first year right now, but for the next 3 years, they'll probably be releasing funding in that category. And I think if applicants made a strong connection between housing and needing funding to meet energy efficiency goals, I think that it might be a strong proposal, but no guarantees, of course. In terms of the question I would pose to this group is, I'm excited that I know I've heard repeatedly our parking requirements are a real barrier to affordable housing. And so I think doing the IPP, in my mind, having any affordable housing project be able to do that is improvement. But I have also heard from many that even the IPP is a barrier. And so just want to get kind of a gut instinct from you all. It may not be anytime soon, but do we pursue reducing the reducing the minimum amount by right? And if so, would also ask the question about, do we have data that shows there is less need? I have heard anecdotally, and we're collecting some of that for our public housing sites, but would love if you all do have data related to how many parking spots per your units you're actually seeing on your projects. So a question and ask. And then the third, Corin sort of dropped the big bomb in terms of what other zoning changes would you want to see? I know of, off the top of I've only been here 1.5 years, and I know of several projects that indicated they would do a much better project if the zoning was different. And so curious in terms of how do we make it easier to rezone for affordable housing projects? And so curious on that too.
I had my hand up. I was just gonna say that this has been in effect for a while for residential, which I thought was kind of backwards that they would place this requirement on kind of potentially some of our lowest economic groups before asking larger developers to do this. So for me, I feel like it's pretty fair. I feel like the way it's written, it seems flexible enough, but I feel like with anything, with any kind of policy, I think that, it'll, you'll have to see how it shakes out in practice, but it seems like a good start. But in general, yeah, I feel like I think that in general, I feel like we need a larger kind of comprehensive plan for affordable housing, and similar to what Flagstaff did, where they have, kind of a list of incentives. They had their plan had a bunch of different zoning and parking and all kinds of incentives for affordable housing. They call it, in lieu of doing inclusionary zoning, they were calling it, I forget what it was called, but it was a, actually Marcos, do you remember what that plan is called?
I don't remember the specific name, but what I remember is this, the city of Flagstaff did was basically created a voluntary program to get around the state preemption on these items. So yeah, so it's purely voluntary as far as developers wanting to opt in to provide affordable housing. And I unfortunately, I haven't kept up with the details of the incentives that they provide for those developers that are willing to do it. But you know, I just think the more flexibility that can be provided for affordable housing, the better. You know, I'm a little unsure about, you know, incentives for something like, you know, the electric car charging stations that might not get utilized in an affordable housing development for a number of years. You know, because just the affordability, of course, electric cars. But I think it's good that, you know, there's going to be an IPP option available that affordable housing developers can pursue, and would just urge the city to make it as flexible a process as possible. So, and, you know, I think we could probably find the city of Flagstaff information on their website and make it available to the group for the next meeting if there's interest.
Sally, and then Megan, and then Joe.
Sure. I was just gonna mention, I can certainly provide data on affordable housing projects and parking ratios. And so I think we're averaging right about 0.75 per unit in the Arizona portfolio. So it's a case we bring to all of our projects. We're always trying to reduce parking, obviously, because the projects where we've built and had excess parking, it just sits there unused, which could be used for better things like more units. So.
And I was just going to piggyback sort of on what Marcos was saying. I would question on the EV readiness if this is the best time. So when we're having a current, you know, shortage of affordable housing or housing, putting more barriers or putting more requirements that are necessary seem challenging and just maybe not the right time to do that. And I will say personally, I am very, very supportive of this, but I recognize that it, you know, maybe it's just a little too soon and that's not really the highest need or the best timing to institute something like that. And we need a bit more flexibility at this point in time. So I would just caution of, is that something that maybe we should postpone or encourage to be postponed and looked at in a year, 2 years later, especially, you know, with Build Back Better being stalled out and with a lot of major dollars to support infrastructure not being put forward, then I think even more caution should be given.
I would agree, Megan. I think what's ironic though is that this is already in place for residential. So a homeowner is required to do this, right? Like, which I think is again, just really in terms of equity, really off balanced, because ADUs are required to have these, which is the smallest form of development. And we're trying to keep those affordable, and there's no exceptions. So, you know, I don't know, just I almost wish that in some ways wish the amendment that there were more exceptions for people in general, you know, for the people who this already is in place, as well as, you know, and I completely understand needing to have other bigger projects needing to have that same flexibility. So I don't, you know, but again, I feel like if you're going to give it flexibility for bigger projects, you should give them to smaller projects too, you know.
Did you get asked to do that for an ADU?
Yeah,
EV
there's a
charging?
big mismatch, right? That's a whole other topic, but there's
Okay,
a big
good.
mismatch between DSD and they say it's a separate dwelling, and if it's a separate dwelling, it has to be separately metered, separated water utilities, electrical meter. It has to follow all the ordinances, solar readiness, gray water ordinance, the inclusive home design, plus now the EV. So you're looking at like a 15, like I costed it out just roughly with contractors. It's like a $15,000 to $25,000 ad difference in price between a guest house and a ADU. And an ADU is smaller. In a lot of cases, a guest house can be bigger, which is just completely craziness. But that's the way the plans reviewers are reviewing it at this point.
That's good feedback, and that can be a different conversation, but the EV outlet should only apply if a new parking space is required for the ADU and there isn't already an outlet for the home in general. And, you know, not all EDUs fall into that, but many of them shouldn't need a parking space if they're close to transit or a bike lane or have street parking. So yeah, that's helpful. Maybe that's something we can work on clarifying.
Joey, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up, Shay. I know I read an article sometime in the last few months about, I think they were calling it synthetic inclusionary zoning, which was, kind of about incentives you could do to promote affordable units, and some things that were talked about almost like linkage fees, some things that could raise funding for affordable units too. So I've heard that term used, and I'm not sure if that's quite what you're thinking of. And thank you, Marcos, for that link to Flagstaff's, so I can take a look at that. Thanks.
Yeah, that's basically, it's kind of a workaround because we're not allowed to do, which I think works well economically. I mean, no one wants to be forced to do anything, right? Like that's not how American capitalism works. So I feel like the more that we can incentivize things, and I feel like, going back to the last policy discussion we had about, this source of income protection, I think the way it's being presented is really off-putting because it's being, the language forced is being used, and that language should never be used. Like that nobody wants to be forced to do anything. I feel like the way the path of least resistance is to try to incentivize people to do the right thing. And so I don't know how, again, we can, even with that policy, be bringing in similar ideas and principles of what works and what's been proven to work, because we want to do the right thing, right? It's not that we don't, but we also have to be mindful of where people are at, and people who are just used to doing things a certain way. If there's any other comments, no other comments on this, should we move on to the next agenda item? Does anyone have anything else to add?
Thank you all for the feedback, and happy for this to be an ongoing discussion, especially around other zoning changes, and would love to hear experiences and any data you have on parking. To Anne's question, we would love to see that.
And Corin, when did you say it's going to mayor and council?
So this proposal is going to Planning Commission for a public hearing March 2nd. I'll share that information with this group as soon as the agenda and materials are posted next Wednesday. But it'll be March 2nd, and then it could be at mayor and council in April, but we don't have a date for that yet.
Okay, thank you, Corin, so much. I think we should probably move on. We're at 3:45 now. Our next topic was the strategic planning goals. It says impact fee concerns and other potential recommendations to mayor and council to increase the supply of affordable housing units in Tucson. So was this part of that same discussion, Corin? Who was gonna?
No, this was something I had asked to have added.
Okay,
You want me to run with it, Shay? Okay,
yes.
so several months ago, I think it was in June, July of this last year, when the commission was first meeting, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do and make sure that, you know, that all of our time is valuable. We want to make sure that we are providing a service to the city and doing things, and just trying to define exactly what the goals and the mission were for the commission. And specific to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, this group, we have two short-term goals and a long-term goal. And I think it's important to kind of reiterate those. And I am going to ask for you guys to do a homework assignment. So Megan, Sally, Jason, everybody who's in the affordable housing business. So the first goal is a short-term goal, is to provide a set of recommendations to mayor and council on activities, levers, and tools that the city can leverage to increase momentum around the affordable housing. So the thought was that there's the HAST plan, which has a lot of good goals in it. But us as a group coming back and trying to think outside the box on what are other things that can be done to incentivize people to want to build affordable housing in Tucson. And, you know, one of the reasons I joined this group is because I don't think Tucson gets its fair share. We have to compete against Phoenix and Maricopa County. And if you look at their population against ours and how many affordable housing units get built up there versus down here, we get probably half when you look at a number of new affordable housing units per, you know, whatever, 10,000 people. So we need to do a better job competing. I think we have a lot of challenges in Southern Arizona. I think costs are higher here and rents are lower, which makes it tougher to make deals happen here. And that's probably part of the reason that people tend to do more work up in the valley than down here. So that's the first goal. And I think that what I'd like to do is, and Shay, I don't know if the best way to do it is for everybody to email you or just to come up with a list, and maybe next meeting we can go through a brainstorming session and try to start logging these ideas and vetting them out. But I want to start to develop that list and flush it out. So the second goal is to identify new funding opportunities for affordable housing. So, you know, there are very few funding mechanisms right now. And I don't personally have a lot of experience with this because I've never personally funded a project, but I think this would be looking at creative ways to fund these new deals. I know that the HUD 202 program is coming back. You know, maybe we could try to do something there again. So, you know, that I think is a secondary goal. That's both short-term and long-term. So I think the immediate and short-term goal, which could have an effect in the next 2 to 4 years, it would be to provide the recommendations on things that we can do to increase momentum of affordable housing. Second is to help identify new funding opportunities. The third goal is a long-term goal, which is we want to set a goal in terms of the number of new affordable housing units within the city of Tucson, and identify a number. Is that what should we be shooting for? How do we know if we are being successful or not as an organization? So, you know, is 1,000 apartments, a good number for 5 years down the road? Is 5,000 apartments a good number for 5 years down the road? But so setting a time frame and a goal on how many new affordable units do we want to see have developed in the city? And so I think that's a third thing, that just in terms of coming up with that number, and then, you know, and then using this as a framework for you know, pushing these meetings forward and having topics to discuss. Does that make sense, everybody? Any questions?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe would everyone be open to maybe a shared Google Doc where we could all kind of brainstorm? I'd be happy to send our teams.
Sorry on the shared Google Doc.
Oh, that's
gotta
right.
be
We
the-
can't open meeting law. Oh, that's right.
People can write to Shay, but you
Okay.
can't have like big emails, big shared anything.
Okay. Well, that's fine. You can all email me and I'll maybe just compile something in OneDrive and Teams. I have both. I use both platforms. I mean, I don't know which people
Well,
prefer.
I think if each person just basically came up with their own list independently, then we come together and try to compile them. So as an example, some of the things that we've talked about are providing impact fee waivers for affordable housing, parking waivers, which we just talked about, zoning flexibility, which would give us access to additional sites. You know, there are things that the city can do. Sales tax waivers on construction. Sales tax is a huge cost for affordable housing. All of those things in and of themselves are small, but if we're able to do a number of them, that will incentivize more projects here and, you know, get more units built. Betty?
Yeah, I really get, you know, where your three goals are really more for multifamily housing and rental housing. But I don't see where we're discussing anything about home ownership and the preservation of existing housing, displacement of people, affordability for, you know, in general, for how having people, you know, stay in their homes. You know, those are all things that I think are a priority right now. So how is it that competing with Phoenix is going to help that, and funding opportunities I think will help both. Quantifying a goal would probably help both, but the first one, I have a real, you know, I understand for multifamily, and I understand for low-income housing tax credits, which is definitely something that we do need. But I think that we're losing, we're not really paying attention to the, you know, to the growing problem of housing affordability for home ownership, which is the wealth building, ending, you know, ending poverty strategy for most of our working class people here in Tucson and in Pima County.
So what are you proposing that we do different?
Well, I'm thinking that we need to not be so short-sighted that we're only thinking about multifamily. I think we need to talk about single family and how we can, you know, incentivize developers, and it doesn't have to be just one house. It can be, you know, I mean, I know we have the ADU, but that's just, you know, for people that have existing housing that can, you know, that are going to be able to afford to build the second house. What about people that
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when we came up with these goals that the intent was for them to not focus on multifamily versus single family. I think it was, they were intended to be more all encompassing for both. So there's no reason we can't provide recommendations that would help new home buyers and things on the single family side as well. I think that would be valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what are the tools that we have now and where are the gaps? You know, I still haven't really gotten a real clear picture of that from any of these meetings yet.
Might be good to have somebody from CPLC or somebody who's actually doing some of that part of this group.
I don't know. Marcos, have you guys done any data mining? Or, I mean, you know, when you do your plan, Maggie, you know, I mean, I'm over here in public housing right now, so I'm a little bit out of the loop on what's going on, but I do know that there's a lot of people that can't afford to buy houses. And I think a really good case study for us may be the 36 in La Cholla project, right? You know, we could really look at everything that happened with that project and figure out what could we have done better, what could be done better, and what did we learn from it, and you know, how can we maybe, if it does include the 14 affordable homes, as they say it will, how can we duplicate that for other developments too, for new development? You know, the NIMBYism that we still have is it's really strong. I mean, you could, if you listen to any of those public hearings, if you were on top of what was going on with that project, and I did go attend the public meetings, and I worked with Council Member Santa Cruz on that project. So I think that's a good case study. Does anybody agree? Does anybody does anyone have any other ideas? Please don't let me do all the talking.
Yeah, Betty, I hear you. I'm with you. I'm in the same boat. I mostly do I do residential projects, and for me, being in residential is craziness to me, the amount of bureaucracy that has been added in the recent history. That Tucson used to be a really affordable place to build, partly because it was so easy to build, and we keep adding, like, right, all these amendments and ordinances on top of and I'm just like, wow, like, it's crazy that, to me, the restrictions happened first at the residential level and they didn't happen in multifamily. So that's really crazy to me, that so much burden has been put on an individual homeowner to meet all these sustainability requirements, all these like requirements that you're, you know, the same or equal to what a big builder is supposed to. So yeah, I'm with you, Betty. Like, I feel like it's gotten to a ridiculous state where people don't want to build here, you know, and you know, and then seeing that resistance with La Cholla, I was like, I think that they arrived at a really good compromise, and the fact that people can't be happy with compromise right now in the community is really frustrating, especially because it's like, at the end of the day, we need housing at all levels, right? Like, brand new housing, what I keep telling people, and what people don't seem to be able to wrap their minds around, is brand new housing keeps gentrifiers out of your old neighborhood, right? Like, it gives people a place to go who want to live here. Like,
Right.
you know, I think that there's a lot, you know, I'm not against, look, any form of housing at any scale, price, size, like, it's big, there's there's room for everybody, right? Like, and there's very different markets, you know. people who are working individually on single family, like that's a whole economy of small builders and small remodelers and flippers. And that's a very different economy than what Jim's doing at his level, right? Like there's just very different economies, and we do need to understand all the levels, all the types, the full spectrum. And my feeling is that if we help, if we create incentives that are effective, they'll work at any scale, whether it's, these same, sales tax, for example, like Jim brought up, like that, why couldn't that have been the La Choya and 36 project, like to help them bring their costs down, right? Like that could be, those types of things should be accessible to everybody at every scale. And but with those commitments, just being very clear about what is being asked of you in terms of affordability, if it's 10% of the units, or if it's a certain amount of Section 8, or whatever it is, that there's a clear, the carrot and the stick, that there's that balance and that it's clear, but yeah, I'm with you, Betty. Like I think a lot of homeowners are struggling, and I'm concerned as well.
Hey, Jim?
Yo.
Yeah, this is Jason. I guess real quick.
Okay.
We at Law Frontera bought a 267 lot subdivision back in 07 to do first time homebuyer projects. We won multiple AHPs and spent pretty much a decade trying to make first time homebuyer work with GO bonds, AHP, subsidy, the whole 9 yards. Bottom line is we ended up putting 4 tax credits on the deal, and I don't have enough time on this call to tell you everything that we learned, but I can tell you that affordable homeownership is a tough road for a number of reasons, and we can get into it later. But if we're talking affordable housing, we talk about a case study. We did it. We refunded 2 HPs. We recycled 252 lots. We went from single family detached home ownership to single family detached rental. We did families, we did elderly, we did project Section 8. You want a case study in first time home buyer, affordable housing versus rental housing? We did it. But it's much more than we could discuss in 15 minutes on this phone call. But there are many reasons why we shifted from, we sold 39 houses and we still have them in the subdivision, and we put 4 tax credits in the same subdivision. So
that being said, I think it's healthy to talk about some of these things. If there are recommendations that we can make to mayor and council that will help incentivize for sale affordable, there's no reason we should keep that stuff off the list. Go ahead and let's add. If there are things that you guys think we should be adding to the list, let's put them on. I don't want to exclude that side of the market, but so we're going to go ahead and Marcos, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just add that, yeah, I agree. I think we should just, those of us that are in a position to provide some recommendations that, could be considered for affordable homeownership incentives. And, I think we can look to what Flagstaff has done, and then also look at some of the local lessons we've learned that Jason has brought up. And I don't want to say that it's impossible. I agree there's challenges, but I also think there are some incentives that can be done that can work. For our down payment assistance program, what we've done is we have increased the amount of down payment assistance available. And the program, that we're operating, the buyers are almost exclusively selecting existing homes because of affordability. The only new homes that we're able to sell to low-income home buyers are being produced by Habitat for Humanity and the Land Trust. I think those 2 organizations are in the best position to help us increase the stock of affordable housing, and maybe some incentives to help developers include you know, some of our affordable housing developers like Habitat and Piclet in their projects to, you know, to build the affordable housing in those developments and help integrate it in those developments. And, you know, everything from that to just making different, increasing density, allowing for some smaller units, you know, encouraging a mix of units. And it's interesting at this 36 in La Jolla, if you look at the older housing subdivision that's there on the south side of 36th Street between La Jolla and Mission, you'll see that they included duplex units at along 36th Street. I think they're mainly, and then as you go further south, the single family units are, you know, are there. But you know, things like that, including a variety of floor plans and sizes to increase accessibility for, you know, working families, low-income families.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
Hi, I just went to the November 2021 Pima County Task Force information that was given to the commissioners. And Betty, you might be interested in this, and I put a bunch of stuff on the chat, but just to answer Betty's question, in 2021, they said within the past year, median sales prices increased by 28%, while the inventory for sale decreased by 64%. So there's a website that you can go to for more of the information, and it's in the chat.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Joe?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about a couple of things. You know, Betty talked about something that's been on my mind too. In this subcommittee, I know it's the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, and we've talked about kind of capital A affordable housing a lot, and housing affordability kind of less in my mind. And I think Betty hit that really well. So thank you for that. And Mary Ann had what I wanted to talk about too, because I knew we had just done market analysis. We had a gap analysis for housing. And this showed that, I know we keep talking about housing supply here, that strictly speaking of units, we had the supply. It wasn't where we needed for it to be affordable to people. So if that says, like Mary Ann says, that there's a shortage of 59,000 affordable and low income households in Pima County, then it sounds like that's the number that is worth shooting for. I was going to say, why don't we go back and look at the gap analysis? But if that's what the number is, then I think that's right on. And the other thing about, you know, talking about this as supply side problems is, I know I've heard it multiple times from multiple people here, but I don't believe you can market rate build your way out of the affordable housing issue. It can't be done. And there's data on that. If anybody goes back to December, the International Journal of Urban and Rural Research had a lot of good articles about that kind of stuff. So that might be good stuff to look at as well. That's all. Thank you.
Go big or go home. Okay, Shay, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just wondering about, you mentioned the impact fees. So were you proposing that there be reductions in impact fees? I think that's a great idea, again, across the board. That's one of the things that people don't want to pay for.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a beef with the impact fees right now because they just went through and redid them all. And the impact was the impact fees went up for multifamily and came down for single family. So, you know, I guess I understand on the market rate side, they have a better ability to handle it. But on the affordable side, you know, the rents are set by HUD. It's a 2-year lagging indicator. So you can't just raise rents to pay for additional costs like that. So there needs to be some sort of a mechanism to help provide assistance on the affordable housing side. I think they went up about an average of $2,000 an apartment. It's a big number. Betty?
Just to let you know, I know that HUD is allowing housing authorities to increase their rents, based on market. So that's something that maybe you can talk to Liz Morales about, for projects within the city. And we usually follow what their FMRs are here in South Tucson for project-based vouchers. But I was going to just add that, Marianne brought something up that the county is also has an affordable housing task force going, and they're just starting up. And I know the city has been invited to be on the task force, a couple of people from the city, including Liz and Ann. I hope that we're not, that we can work together with the county and the city. We shouldn't be duplicating, we should be leveraging, and, it's a good way to make housing equitable, so if there are projects in the city that need additional funds, maybe, the county can provide that extra funding if it's, if it's in a high poverty area or an area that needs, that needs an area of opportunity, that we could make it more of an area of opportunity. So I'm hoping that that's what happens, and that we're not, that we're sharing information, and that I think there's people in this group that are going to be on that group as well. So, it'll be interesting. And that the priorities are also in line with each other, so, hopefully, I think it's good that, we can make it more regional affordability, regional, changes and improvements in whatever we do. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Betty. Megan, did you have something? I know your hand was up earlier.
It was, but I think it was already captured. And I, from Betty's comments, I just wanted to add that I think it is important for us to focus on ways that we can produce first, like affordable home ownership. And so I would encourage that should definitely be on the table for what we put forward. And obviously, I think one of the biggest barriers right now is cost. So it doesn't make sense for a builder to produce that low income housing. And so Jason clearly can speak more to that, and probably has learned a lot that I hope that informs sort of what might be recommendations, and Shay as well, in terms of what needs to be done to try and lower or incentivize. But it probably does come down to what funding opportunities are available to support that. I am curious, if we end up having additional funds, the ERAP funds or other funds that could be used towards that. I think homeownership is always a really important aspect to it. So I appreciate you bringing that to the table, Betty.
Shay, did you have another thing?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, where I keep hoping that city and county can collaborate is on a bond deal. Let's get a affordable housing bond put through. I think with the momentum now and the political climate, I think if it was very focused and it was just affordable housing, I think it could be very attractive to voters. And then the other idea that came to mind with funding for me, when we were at the Arizona Housing Forum this year, it was really exciting. Someone was doing, kind of like how when you go to the grocery store and like they raise money, like would you donate or round up $1 or your change for XYZ charity. Well, someone started doing that for affordable housing, which I thought was really cool. And they were funneling that money back into their housing trust funds. And so we have a housing trust, right? Tucson has a trust that has no source of income right now. So finding some source of income from that trust. Betty, also, can you share your idea, which I thought was a great one? It required a text amendment at the state legislature, but it had to do with the excess, it was excess fees at the county side. Betty, are you there?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the county owns a lot of properties that are tax liens, that are trust deeds, I guess you would call them, or tax deeds. I can't remember the proper name, but they're deeds or tax liens that they're pretty seasoned, so seasoned that nobody really wants to buy them because what's owed is more than what the property is worth a lot of times. And now this was when I was at the county and I was researching this. And so the county has the ability to transfer property, land to a nonprofit. I don't believe that the city does because they have a charter, they have a different charter, and so that doesn't allow them to do that. But unless it's federal funds, but the county can actually take these public lands and transfer them right now to the transportation department and the flood department. But if we could get legislation changed and just add in that statute that they could transfer it to affordable housing, then we could possibly get those, even though the county has the tax lien, it's still a state deed, I think is the way it runs, because it still belongs to the state, but the state allows the county to transfer those liens to flood and to transportation. Those are the only two things. But if we could lobby and change it to add and affordable housing, that could open up some opportunities on tax liens. That was something that I was working on with the real estate division at Pima County right before I left. And then as far as the bonds, you have to, of course, there has to be a bond market in order for the county or the city to want to, to have a voter approved bond initiative. And I don't think I think it may be getting there soon, but right now it's not really feasible for them to go out for a bond. But Shay, I would say that a strategy is that whenever the county or the city go out to the voters for a bond, that they include a portion of that bond for affordable housing, because whether it's for roads, for parks, whatever it is, there's always a nexus to housing. And that's where we can make the case. So I think we should always have that in the back of our, and when the bond market gets active again, is that if there is a bond, that we make sure that housing is a part of it, just like we did in 97 and 2004. I think those are the only two, right, Marcos? I can't remember anymore. But now at least we know how, with those, we learned from each bond issue that the county did for affordable housing. We learned from each one on how to do it better the next time. So this next time, if there is a next time, the importance is in how you ask the question to the voters, right? How you phrase it and what you say. And as long as it's a public benefit and we can show that it's a public benefit, then it's an eligible funding source for us.
Okay, so just to kind of bring this, circle back and bring this to closure. We're gonna get out of this what we put into it. And so I'm hoping that you guys, if you can make phone calls, other people in the business, maybe people out of state, find out what other jurisdictions are doing. And Shay, does everybody have Shay's email address? If not, maybe Shay, you can put it on the chat. Send her your suggestions before the meeting. If you don't do that, we can go through them in the next meeting. And let's try to develop a comprehensive list, and then we can start working on how to vet those out and narrow them down to what we think should be recommended to mayor and council that we think is actionable and will make a difference. Does that sound good? Okay, thank you. Back to you, Shay.
All right, I think we've got like 10 minutes left, so we might have to skip the next agenda item, the HAST implementation. There's the home, was that gonna be you, Ann?
Yep, and I can be quick.
Okay,
I
great.
just want to make 3 announcements. One is, most of you know, we did release our Home American Rescue Plan funding RFP. So everyone knows we are not releasing traditional home funding this year. So this is our one funding RFP to support affordable housing rental development this year. We do plan on late this year for next year releasing traditional home funding. So an update on that, that's available on our website. Second thing is in the HAST plan, and I've heard from some of you and some other developers that in particular with LIHTC projects and the QAP not being able to qualify for impact fee waivers is a real hindrance. And so on March 8th, Mayor and Council will be discussing expanding the impact fee program to include both nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations. Most of you know that right now it's just for nonprofit organizations. What is being proposed is adding for-profit organizations as long as the affordability terms are aligned with the affordable housing goals. And then the third update is over the next 2 weeks, maybe sooner, we plan on releasing a request for qualifications. This is our first HAST development project in terms of our using city-owned land for development. Two sites that have been in the works for a really long time, the 11th Avenue in Dunbar Spring and Westmoreland lots in Menlo Park. So we will be releasing a request for qualifications for a co-developer. We are looking for affordable home ownership or a rent-to-own model. So for the reasons that Jason outlined earlier, we're allowing people to submit under either option, but the long-term goal being affordable home ownership for those sites. So that request, I'll send out an email, we'll do a blast, but we anticipate that RFQ will go out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, we've got 6 minutes left. I think we're just about done. Let me see what else we have left here.
Jay, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Do you know what the turnaround time on that RFQ will be, Ann?
We are looking, we haven't finalized that there's going to be 2 phases. The qualifications part, I believe 6 to 8 weeks was going to be the turnaround. Neto's shaking his head. And then from there will be a narrow we'll narrow the list to invite people to a request for proposals phase.
Very cool. That's exciting. Yeah, those are very visible sites. They've been talked about for a long time. So I would be so happy to see something built on those sites. So the next steps, items, does anyone have any items for the next meeting? I think we have homework, so I think we're pretty well covered. And unless there's any objections, should we close 5 minutes early? I'll go ahead and someone want to make the motion to adjourn?
So moved. I make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, great. I assume no opposition, so we'll close our meeting today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye.
Bye, thank you.